All right, ladies and gentlemen. So I did my research, and it turns out that, drum roll please, if ChatGPT is correct, Jesus probably wasn't black. He was probably Mizrahi Jew or Palestinian looking, based on geographically where he's from. Um, so we're still doing Black Jesus. Don't get me wrong. That's what we're here for today. So if that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. But I feel like we're going to have to do a fourth video where we actually do a historically accurate Jeebus face. Anyway, if that video sounds interesting to you, comment below. I might not even care. I'm probably just going to do it anyway. But today's Black Jesus. So, yeah, go ahead, pull up a cup of coffee, however you like to do it. You can put cream in it. It's okay. And yeah, we're going to have fun. This will be a really good time. I'm actually going to do my best to research what folks from Northern Africa might look like or do look like historically. You know what I mean? And so this will be an interesting couple Google searches. And yeah, without further ado, I'm Clay, the Techie Tattooer. Let's get to the iPad. All right, so after doing a little bit of Google searching here, it turns out that like the folks who currently live in Egypt, that, outermost tip of Africa where we could, be getting into those other historically, biblical lands, right? Not that Egypt isn't a historically biblical land, let my people go, right? Anyway, right. So, I figured, that's kind of, the interesting place to start if we're going to do Black Jesus. There is currently, it looks like the Berber people are the most indigenous people I can quickly search up with the Google machine. Aside from the fact that I guess it's like 60 to 70% like Arab right now, but like blah, 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 blah. There's like all kinds of political stuff about that this is not going to be about. So that was a way deeper dive than I expected to go into. But historically, if you look at some of these, right, those are some pretty dark-skinned people. These are some pretty dark-skinned folks, right? And it seems like, if you're looking at, National Geographic putting out stuff about Black pharaohs and, books about Black pharaohs on Amazon. And I mean, there's like this one, that dude right there, yeah, he has the more Asian, like, epithelial, I can't remember what they're called, but right, where the different eye setups and stuff like that. But there's got the fairly wide nose, definitely has Will Smith's ears. Like that's the thing, this picture shows up a lot, showing the hairstyles of, how things just like didn't change and how certain cultures, kept things going. And if you go back and look and see, well, hey, look, these people are still doing it. So this is probably what those people looked like. These aren't hard jumps to make, historically, right? And so, yeah, so there's a lot to go off on this. And because I don't want to get too super serial about this and that kind of stuff, we're going to use this guy's face as the reference because dude is dope. Okay. Like this is just so good. And this is apparently like some wall hanging you can get. It's some kind of painting that somebody did. Let's go ahead and visit Amazon so we can attribute this person correctly here. Brand Crowned Us. Okay. So I don't know what that means. Crowned Us brand. It just literally says Black man Egyptian pharaoh brown 16 by 7. So like I said, we're not going to take this too super seriously, but at the same time, we're going to have a bunch of fun at this, fun with this because, yeah, historical accuracy is super, super important, right? I was actually really stoked on like, possibly having Black Jesus be a real thing because he's described as having woolen hair in the Bible. but apparently it's not a textural thing. Apparently they're describing his hair as being white like wool, not, curly like wool. So that was slightly disappointing for me to find out in my fact finding mission. But anyway, enough about that. Let's get on to Black Jesus. Let's go ahead and import this drawing in here. Or import. Yeah, I mean, it's a piece of art. All right, and here we go with our model. I actually think that's going to turn out really good, honestly. All right, so we're going to bring the opacity way down here on this layer, grab ourselves a new layer, and I am going to do like the tiniest bit of kind of like pre-planned sketching. So I'm going to turn my streamline way down on this just to get a nice sketch on my technical pen. And it's not so much that I'm going to be worried about sketching his face as it's going to be like getting this chin thing down. Remember, we're doing American traditional as well, right? So we got to keep that in mind. Got to give him that same kind of Jesus collar thing going on there that's in the classic. Something kind of like that. That. Okay, yeah, something kind of. And yeah, so you probably just noticed that, folks, that my voice just cut out there because I don't know what my iPhone is doing. It is giving me major lip during these recordings and whatnot. And so sorry about that. But yeah, it looks like we're going to get some cutting in and some cutting out during this video where there's going to be me doing the voiceover and then, us going back and forth between the actual audio that I recorded. Yeah, I definitely miss my Android at this point because I have no idea why the audio was cutting out on this video. Yeah, I honestly can't figure that out. Or rather, I can figure it out. I just haven't yet. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and get the fast forward again going on this, or fast forward going at all on this little section here because this is just me futzing with his head a little bit. I'll draw his eyebrows in and. All right, so we're just going to go ahead, drop the opacity way down on that sketch layer there, just so that I can, map where his head's at and where the neck's at and all that kind of stuff. Here I am actually debating on what sort of hairstyle I'm going to give him, whether or not we're going to go for like, the models that I showed you where it's like that interesting tiered, yeah, I don't really like the tiered dreadlocks look that other guy had from the example from the Google search. I end up going for just like, we'll go ahead and call it the Jerry Curl Jesus look. But yeah, it ended up working out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out on this design and whatnot. Um, yeah, now I'm just testing line weights here. I think I end up going up to 20%. And that's because I want to make sure that this guy and the other Jesus all have that same thicker line weight that I've kind of been going with. With the Mother Mary tattoo, we went a little bit thinner on that. But again, I want to make sure that these are all just similar. And then, of course, when you were dealing with these two faces, these are really what we want to make sure are the most similar, so they look like they're a set, as it were, that kind of thing. Um, Now I'm just kind of making choices on how to make it a little bit more extreme, right? I make his eye socket just a little bit sharper and more defined just because, in American traditional, it is kind of, cartoony like that, where we're not going to necessarily follow his entire outline perfectly, but right, notice how this kind of like under cheek, under the eye part, is just more pronounced. We'll go more pronounced for his eyes as well. When I get to his eyes, they're going to be bigger. Yeah, just making sure that we're not worried too much about following his face exactly, but that more we are focused on using his face as the structure of our design. Yeah, again, we're just going to go ahead and hit fast forward here and get through these basics of this work because as you can see, I'm futzing through here and really just trying to get everything absolutely perfect. And you guys can see the finished product when we get there. This isn't that important.
Life is not always easy. Challenges come like strong waves trying to drown us. Sometimes the pain seems unbearable, and the desire to give up takes over our mind. But it is precisely in these moments that faith needs to be greater than the fear of losing. Every struggle brings a lesson. Every difficulty hides a purpose. What seems impossible today can become your greatest victory tomorrow. You have faced difficult days before and overcame them. Why would this time be any different? God never said it would be easy, but he promised it would be worth it.
All right. Yeah, those are some pretty aggressive eyebrows, but we'll be okay with that. Perfect circle there, or kind of perfect. And we're going to give him this, but then we're going to give it a nice boom. Nice edge to that. Bring that in just a little bit more. Yep. Come in with the chin. Boop. But we're only going to need the tiniest bit because we got to remember we got to throw that beard in there. We got to get that beard looking on point. Excuse me, that was disgusting. Hopefully you didn't hear that. A bit of that Cupid bow kind of going on in there. Yep. Maybe we bring this all the way back to there with a little bit of a frown, but more of hopefully a stern face than a full-on frown. Hopefully looking strong, not... Yeah, that actually does look pretty good. Okay, cool. Go ahead and... Is this guy gonna have an ear? Because we do have to plan what we want to do with the hair. Because I did the other Jesus with just the twisty twist, let's go ahead and go with just the twisty twist for this crown of thorns as well, which means I'm going to go back to a hard blend brush. And I think that's what ended up happening the last time, is that I couldn't find a good in-between size, could I? But let's see how this goes. Because I want it to be... There we are. That's a little bit better, but I am going to give it some warp to kind of make it look like it's coming along his head a little bit more towards that head shape, right? Yep, that does look better. Okay. And then we're just going to go ahead, bring the opacity down on this layer, and bring up a new layer to keep going with that
Never said it would be
crown of thorns
easy. Only
outline.
promised it would be worth it. Every stumble is a step towards your growth. Every tear waters your strength, and every challenge overcome brings you closer to your best version. Believe me, better days will come. What seems like a storm today will soon become a distant memory. As long as there is faith in your heart to move forward, the impossible will become reality. Lift your head, take a deep breath, and keep going. Your future is waiting for you. If you're waiting for an answer, calm down. God's timing is perfect. The answer you've been waiting for is already on its way. Fear wants to hold you back, but do you know what changes everything? The first step. Take the first step. Start. Your future depends to act now. I know it's hard that it seems like nothing will change, but listen, every storm passes. Hold on tight, take a deep breath, and keep going. Your tomorrow can be much better than today. If you don't give up now, pain may be shaping you, hardships may be strengthening you, but none of them define who you are. You are bigger than that. Get up and go. If today doesn't make sense, trust. Sometimes God closes a door because He is preparing you for something much greater. Your victory has already been written and will come at the right time. You have already won so many battles, overcome so much. Don't stop now.
And here we are, going back to that face layer to get the neck and collar, I guess. I mean, I guess Jesus wore like a bathrobe or something. I'm not actually really sure. A tunic, long tunic, man's night tunic, whatever. Um, yeah, so the collar of that, right? All right, let's go back into fast forward again, folks. I think I'm going to choose some different music, though.
Rising in the dawn, the sun took orders. Faith in the veins, like the blood of the martyrs. Walking through the storm with the armor of light. Blessed in the darkness, soul ignites. Voices in harmony, choirs of the faithful. Hands to the sky, blessings uncountable. Mountains may move, spirit unshakable. Heart set ablaze, devotion undeniable.
So I mentioned before that this is the where we're going to use these shapes, right, as the shapes of his face, but notice how way much bigger we're going to make those eyeballs. These kinds of things, right, where we're going to be tracing our designs in certain instances, not in every instance, right? You know me, we pop back and forth between this stuff, but we're never truly tracing our designs. We're still allowing our American traditional rules and other designs that we know and love to really make sure that those style choices, those style standards, I suppose, are what we're sticking to, and not allowing ourselves to get lazy and just say, oh, well, this is the way this guy's face is, so that's how I'm going to do it. Yes, that's how we're going to shape the eyes. And you'll notice that I actually followed on that upper eye the exact kind of angular curvature of his eyelid to make this happen. But I still made choices to make it far bigger. And that's just, yeah, right. As artists, those are the things we're going to want to do. And that's going to add confidence, right, with our clients and all that kind of stuff. And they're going to, see that we're able to not just trace up a design where he's going to look all squinty and like, why does the eyes on this guy look so small or funky, or why do they look cheeched out? No, we want to make sure that we are using photographs or whatever references we're using as a general shape language to show us how to break these images down into their core components, but then use our knowledge of the specific style we're going to be tattooing or drawing in, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, but that style guide standard is going to really be what's going to inform how you're going to do your lines, right? Like me just using the monoline, for instance, on these kinds of designs and making sure it's thicker, and then having to, X out a bunch of the details because I am forcing myself to make it American traditional by using thicker lines and then having to simplify the shapes or the line work because of the thickness of the lines that I'm choosing. Um, yeah, so those are just things that, you want to keep in the front of your mind as you are going along, either following along with me or hopefully branching out on your own and trying these techniques. And when you're implementing them, keep in mind that each individual style that you're going to be drawing in is going to, right, like here I was like, oh no, this line that doesn't look good at all. That's why I spend so much time just like looking at it like, ugh, no, I did not like it, because it made his eyes look baggy and gross. And yeah, right, just little things we need to do. And I think I even leave it on the right eye but take it off on the left eye. Totally an American traditional kind of like, meh, whatever, close enough. And you'll probably not notice if I hadn't called myself out for that kind of thing. It's not even, the style of art just eats those kinds of imperfections because that's how it's supposed to be, right? Yeah, and there we are. Those are the eyes. I do like it. And right here I'm explaining how we needed to make him look more forward because when his eye was a little bit in that center, like I did, right now he's absolutely looking forward. When before he kind of had this wall-eyed look. And yeah, you want to get rid of that, and you want to make sure that you're not, yeah, make your character, whatever, your subject, looking in the same direction. Like we're not flies, or I don't know, what are those chameleons that can look in multiple directions? Anyway, so here I try to give him the standard Jesus beard, and the heart shape does not work for what I'm trying to do to make his. I mean, it's just not going to work with the really curly hair that I want to give him. And I'm trying to make it work, trying to give it some perspective, trying to, keep that sort of quote unquote classic Jesus look going. Um, but I have to give up, and I have to decide that nope, we're going to stick with Black Jesus. And Black Jesus is going to have just an awesome curly, like almost Mesopotamian beard, right? Like those Mesopotamian statues, the Anunnaki with the wings and stuff like that. And so, yep, that's what I end up going for with this. And, obviously we're going to fast forward again because nobody needs me to see. Yeah, it's just a million squiggly lines. You get the point.
Praise the heavens, raise your hands high, feel the beat drop, echo to the sky, glory to the King, let the world testify, sing hallelujah, forever magnify. Forever magnify. Seeking peace where the valleys grow deep. Grace in the waves when the tempests don't sleep. Scriptures in the mind, wisdom so steep. Strength from the Lord, promises I keep. Rhythm in the soul, beats of salvation. Echoes of love, breaking condemnation. Lyrics of truth, our eternal foundation. Eagles wings soar unto every nation.
So, yep, I will admit that just like with White Jesus, that this top of the head, man, because I'd done it before, it didn't give me nearly as much planning lip because I understood the assignment. But like you can see there, like those are way too big, and like getting the little waves the same distance and height and size and all that good jazz. Me, I'm super OCD about that kind of stuff, and it took me a while. So don't get discouraged if you find yourself like redrawing these things a million different times. It's all practice, it's all good. I've been drawing my entire freaking life, and stuff like this, especially like over a curve, like it it takes lots of practice, it takes lots of time, It takes lots of patience with yourself, right? Like there I go, getting way too big again. Yeah, so if you find yourself doing those same kind of things and just like getting frustrated and you're like, man, I am not getting this right. I need to be doing better. Don't worry. Be kind to yourself. We all do it. We all suffer through these kinds of things. And I'm going to make you suffer through some more Christian inspirational music while we fast forward through the Jerry Curl Jesus hair.
Praise the heavens, raise your hands high, feel the beat drop, echo to the sky. Glory to the King, let the world testify. Sing hallelujah, forever magnify. Forever magnify. Praise the heavens.
And now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and start a new layer, get his ear all in there, right? And yeah, we are getting towards done on the outline of this design here, folks. I do end up going a little more lore-tastic, I will admit. I got a little bit silly where I did decide to look up an olive branch and see what the heck an olive branch looks like for his American traditional background. So he's a little bit more thematically Jeebus. So yeah, so he's got olive flowers and an olive branch, but that's just me being extra. If you're noticing all of the hairlines through the thorn crown, that's because I do everything on separate layers. And of course, I'm going to go through there and just erase out all of those little hairlines to make my crown nice and, whatever, not transparent, but empty, get those hairlines out of there. But yeah, we'll get there and do that. And then of course, we got to make Jesus look gaunt and super super ripped, like he's been on a, multi-month cut, because that's just what we do with Jesus. But yeah, that's him, folks. I feel like that's looking pretty good for that. And yeah, let's go ahead and fast forward on to the whatever that olive branch was I was talking about.
Yeah, man, I told y'all. It's time to wake up from your spiritual slumber. Stand like a Christian. I said I stand like a Christian, talk like a Christian, walk like a Christian. I am a Christian, man, I am what I am by the grace of God. And I ain't turning my back, I'm chasing God. I said I stand like a Christian, talk like a Christian, walk like a Christian. I am a Christian, man, I am what I am by the grace of God. And I ain't turning my back, I'm chasing God. Man, I'm doing what I gotta do to stand for Christ. With my back to the wall, my hands will fight. Go to war with the demons up in the night. I don't trust in myself, only in the Lord's might. Walking on this road, you get bumps and bruises, but God can't stand no more excuses. Trees without fruit only serves as useless, and half of you out there all are clueless. Sins are foolish, so why would you do this? If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were stupid.
Now we're just going to go ahead and drop the opacity down on the flora here. And I don't end up tracing up the olive branch because it's just too simple. But I do actually end up tracing, well, ish tracing, my version of tracing the olive flowers, because they're weird little like four-petaled flowers that I am so not used to drawing. So it definitely like took me a sec to kind of figure out like what the core shapes were and how to yeah. So the olive flowers themselves were a little bit weird for me. I'm not gonna lie there. That was kind of a trip. So what I'm doing there, right, is I didn't want the top of that spike touching my olive flower or olive leaf. I wanted that little bit of the gap in there. And so you're seeing that's why I ended up being like, nope, that's too close. Some people aren't going to care, right? American traditional is notorious for those kinds of little touchy lines here and there and whatnot. Me personally, though, I don't like it. It comes from like the cartoon drawing training I've had about keeping each individual shape on its own, by itself, in its own little house and whatnot. But yeah, American traditional is a little bit fudgy and hinky like that and doesn't necessarily force you to adhere to those kinds of rules. That's why you'll hear me call American traditional wonky all the time. It's because of those kinds of things that, to me, quote unquote, break some of your more traditional cartoon rules. But, every style has its own wonkiness and its own, nobody ever had four fingers running around but the Simpsons, and, that they've seemed to have been doing okay with it for a few years. So, yeah. Hopefully, you noticed there that I did actually start a whole new layer for my olive flowers. Um, and I do give it the college try and be like, okay, I can do four floral, leafy, petal things. Like, come on, I'm an artist. I know how to do this. As I'm looking at this and I'm just going, no, that's just I just don't understand what these little flowers are really supposed to look like. And so I give up and just bring it on down, and we're just gonna trace these puppies up here.
When I was down and out, no hope in sight, he made a way, turned my darkness to light. He fed me when I had no bread, put a roof over my weary head. He is still God, forever the same. Mercy and grace poured out in his name. Through every trial, every storm, every rock, I stand and declare he is still God.
Here we are, just going through that last little bit of cleanup. Again, this is why I keep everything on separate lines so that I can draw each of these individual pieces in their full glory. Why not? We'll keep the language on point today, right? So that way I can make sure every individual element is nice and full and exactly what it needs to be, layer them on top of each other, and then cut out the overlapping pieces. Again, that's just my personal style. A lot of people think, very validly, of course, that you can just put all the line work on one line work layer. Could be a lot of extra work doing what I'm doing. But it's just my process. It's just how I like to do stuff. And so please develop your own processes. You don't necessarily have to do what I'm doing to get my results. This is just how I get my results. And yeah, last little bit of the trace out here. And then we are on to putting our blacks in this puppy, sinking the blacks, and which seems even less appropriate for this video to say, but yeah, we're gonna do it. Now that I've called myself out on saying that, I'm never gonna be able to say it without, coming for the black. Anyway, that's just the problem with hearing yourself on video too many times, folks. It's an issue. No, get rid of that line. You don't need it. Less is better, dude. Stop it. Less is stop. Exactly. Cut that stuff out. There we are. It's good. It's all we need, folks. Which means it's time to be brave and smoosh everything onto one big line work layer. Boink. Yep, there we go. Gonna go ahead and duplicate it for absolutely no good reason, because it's not like I'm even going to touch this layer anymore at all. But like always, I've created a layer underneath the layer, and that is going to be my shading layer, or rather the layer I put my black shading onto, and then all of the other subsequent color layers are going to be below that black layer. Obviously, we have to turn the line work layer into the reference layer in order for our auto select tool to work properly. But hopefully you've watched enough of my videos that you are aware of this tactic. And if you haven't, it's great. Use the reference little button there on your reference layer. It's so handy dandy. It will allow you to do exactly this, very similar to what Alpha Lock does, except that it works on multiple layers instead of just the currently selected or alpha locked layer. Um, yeah, but yeah, let's go ahead and fast forward through this because the choices are pretty much super simple American traditional style choices where for underneath things, right, you can see the centers of these kind of tucking underneath his collar there. We go black, and then we go for the skin breaks for the over, right, kind of like you think about it like a Celtic thing for over, under, over, under. Any piece that's going over another piece where they are intersecting or overlapping, that's where you're going to make the skin break on the over piece. And then the under piece is going to have black shading tucking right up against that skin break to fake, or I don't know, yeah, I guess the word is fake, the idea of the topographical map of that given design. And it doesn't really fake it, but it cartoonifies it or pictographicalizes it, or I don't know. There's probably some actual scientific word for when you make something not realistic but still depict it in a pseudo realistic fashion. Yeah, words. They're interesting. So yeah, so you can see here how I'm going to be futzing around with all the selections and giving it that same basic treatment that I gave the other Jesus, where it's going to be really dark black behind the crown. And then, we're just doing classic um, wave shading, right? Like we would do with any sort of curly haired design, whether it's your stand up pinup girl or, whatever else have you, where we're putting black in the deep part of the finger wave there, or, the curl wave, right? It's not that he's got finger waves anyway. In case you couldn't tell, I used to be a cosmetologist. Right. And we're putting black in the dark part, leaving the highlight open in the light part. um, I do end up saying forget that, and I end up putting gray, opaque gray, in the highlights of his hair because I just didn't like the really stark contrast of the black to pure white. I don't think it really fit the design. I just thought it was just a little bit too kapow and in your face. But, again, these are all personal choices. You might totally disagree, and you could have very good reasons for making different artistic choices, right? Like the mole here, that was supposed to be the other side of his beard. I decided, nope, that's not really what I'm trying to go for with that look, because it did end up just looking like a weird beauty mark. And American traditional can be like that, right? Where, yes, in theory, I should have another little piece of his beard there to kind of, or his mustache to show that it's there, but yeah, it just didn't feel right to me. Now, of course, again, my iPhone is giving me lip, and so we've jumped over to the uh, iPad Pro's export function in Procreate to finish this design up. But as you can see, we didn't really miss much. It was just me shading in the collar there. Here I am just color dropping in a nice brown, cleaning that up. This is, a standard green that we're laying in. I do the same exact green in his crown that I did in the other Jesus drawing, with the same yellow treatment for having the yellow spikes. This guy doesn't get any blood on him just because, it just didn't seem to feel right. And plus, the brown with the red, it's not going to have a super stark contrast on it. And so it just wasn't as interesting a design choice. Yeah, using blue highlights, or rather blue lowlights, in your flowers is a great way to fake a white texture or a white color, because you just leave it open skin and then use a nice light blue to add as the shading for a white. Threw in a little bit of whatever that natural cloth color is, unbleached muslin or whatever. I'm not even sure what to call that color. Um, and then, yeah, I'm going through and I am adding what you just missed there. If you saw it, was a little bit of extra shading in his eye there, in the cheekbone, and in the ear. That is another darker brown. Just because I thought that that was nice to do, kind of like a two-tone thing, so that it wasn't just exclusively the black shading. But that's it, folks. That is our Black Jesus design. Hopefully this was a fun tutorial for you to watch. It was really fun for me to do. I feel like we need to do a historically accurate Jesus as well, but you know, comment below and let me know if I'm just getting lost in the sauce on that one. Otherwise, the next video series is going to be about bringing in some classic art stuff like Sailor Jerry, Bert Grimm, you know, all those classic dudes, and redrawing some of their pieces, and so that we can really, really study the American traditional classics. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.